The ship moved through the darkness, a silent speck of metal and light. The Terran survey vessel Scout's light drifted towards the distant green and blue marble of Novaya Aurora. On the bridge, Captain Lee Jun leaned forward in his chair, a cold knot forming in his stomach. The silence was wrong. For 3 days, there had been no communication from the colony. No routine data bursts, no chatter from the orbital traffic control, not even automated beacon pinging. It was as if the planet had simply been swallowed by the void. Jun's console showed only the steady, meaningless pulse of the planet's magnetic field. No energy signatures. No ship transponders. Nothing. Any change, Sumi? He asked, his voice low. Commander Park Sumi, his first officer, shook her head. Her fingers flew over her tactical display, her brow furrowed in concentration. Negative, Captain. Full spectrum scan shows 0 artificial electromagnetic emissions from the surface or orbit. It's a complete blackout. This is not a system failure. It's a total silence. Jun nodded, the cold knot tightening. Novaya Aurora was a thriving agricultural colony. 40,000 souls who had turned a lush, Earth-like world into a breadbasket for the outer systems. His niece, Ji-Hai, was there. She had sent him a message just a week ago, a video of the vast, golden fields of gene-modified wheat waving under a twin sunset. Her smile had been bright, full of hope. He pushed the memory away. Hope was a luxury a captain could not afford. Bring us into low orbit, Jun ordered. Full sensor suite active. I want visual on Aurora Prime. The Scout's light, a small vessel meant for mapping and minor emergencies, hung as it descended. The planet filled the main viewport, a beautiful serene sphere of white clouds and blue oceans. But as they neared the main settlement's coordinates, the Serenity shattered dot where the city of Aurora Prime should have been. A sprawling metropolis of glass and permacrete. There was only a vast, dark scar. The sensor images resolved on the screen, and the collective breath caught on the bridge. The land was covered in a smooth, glassy substance that reflected the sunlight in a sickly rainbow sheen. Fused glass. The telltale sign of orbital plasma bombardment at maximum intensity. The city was gone. Not ruined, erased. Mother of God, whispered the helmsman. Zoom in on grid 7, Sumi said, her voice clinical, a defense against the horror. The image shifted. They could see the outlines of foundations, the ghostly shapes of streets now filled with black glass. Here and there, the melted skeletons of ground cars and shuttlecraft lay like twisted metal sculptures. Life signs? Jun asked, already knowing the answer. None, Sumi confirmed, her face pale. Atmospheric scan shows elevated radiation, residual plasma particles, and complex hydrocarbons consistent with widespread organic incineration. She swallowed. There are no life signs, Captain. Not a single one. Jun closed his eyes for a moment. 40,000 people. Farmers, engineers, teachers, children. Ji-Hai. Gone. A wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced it down. Deploy all reconnaissance drones. Scan the entire hemisphere. I need to know the scale. The drones shot away from the ship, their feeds appearing on secondary screens. Each one told the same terrible story. The smaller settlements, the outlying farms, the mining outposts, all were glassy craters or smoldering ruins. The attack had been thorough, systematic. It was not a raid. It was an eradication. Captain, Sumi said suddenly, her voice sharp. I'm picking up a weak power signature. It's intermittent, buried under about 10 meters of rubble near what was the Colonial Administration Complex. It's a data core's emergency beacon. A flicker of something not hope, but purpose ignited in Jun's chest. Get a recovery team down there. Full hazard gear. I want that core. The landing shuttle touched down on a plane of cracked, still warm glass. Sergeant Kin Taeshik led the three-person team out, their boots crunching on the unnatural surface. The air tasted of ozone and ash. Kim was a veteran, a man who had seen conflict on frontier worlds, but this was different. This was a graveyard without bodies. The heat had been so intense, it had vaporized everything. They located the signal, digging through chunks of collapsed building material with careful, urgent hands. Finally, they pulled a heavy, blackened cylinder from the wreckage, the colony's primary data core, hardened against disaster. It was scorched and battered, but the faint light of its beacon still pulsed. Back on the Scout's light, the ship's engineer worked to interface with the damaged core. The data was fragmented, corrupted by the immense energy that had destroyed its home. But some files were recoverable. The bridge crew gathered around the main screen as June ordered the playback of the last visual logs. The images were jumpy, chaotic. They showed the sky, filled with strange dagger-shaped ships of a sleek, silver-black design. They moved with impossible silence and precision. Then the view shifted to ground level. Panicked crowds ran as beams of emerald energy lanced down from the sky, not exploding, but disintegrating whatever they touched. Buildings did not collapse. They melted and flowed like wax. The final log was an audio file, time-stamped at the beginning of the attack. It was the voice of Governor Park, a man June had met once, a kind man with a gentle laugh. His voice was now strained, filled with terror and a desperate dignity. "This is Governor Park of Novaya Aurora to any Terran vessel. We are under attack by an unidentified alien force. Their weapons are like nothing we have. They are bombarding the population centers from orbit. They have landed troops. They are not taking prisoners." A sound of a distant, sizzling blast, then a choked sob. "They are erasing us. Tell Terra. Tell them to remember us. Remember November." The transmission ended in a stream of static dot for a long minute. No one on the bridge spoke. The silence was heavier than the void outside. "Play back the visual of the ships," June said, his voice a dry rasp. He studied the dagger-like profiles, the sinister elegance of their design. Su-Mi, cross-reference with known Xeno designs. She worked silently, then looked up, her eyes wide. "No match. These are completely new. No records in any database. They're Krail. The who?" The helmsman asked. "The Krail. It's from Deep Space Probe reports years old. A rumor, a whisper. A hyper-advanced, isolationist species. The reports said they believed in a cosmic purity. They view other spacefaring races as infections." Su-Mi looked at the image of the glassed planet on the screen. "This is their idea of cleaning." June stood up, walking to the viewport. He looked down at the dead world, at the tomb that had been his niece's home. The cold knot in his stomach had turned into a burning coal of fury. Grief would come later. Now there was only one thing. Record a message for immediate tight beam transmission to Terran High Command and Admiral Quan Min of the Third Fleet, he said, his tone flat, final. "Use priority Omega encryption." He turned to face his crew, their faces reflecting the same stunned horror, the same dawning anger. He spoke clearly, each word falling like a stone. "Message begins. Novaya Aurora is destroyed. Repeat, the colony is destroyed. No survivors detected. Attack was perpetrated by vessels of unknown, presumably Krail origin. Attack was a planetary-scale extermination. Evidence confirms total, deliberate annihilation of all human life on the surface." He paused, the image of Governor Park's final moments burning in his mind. The governor's last words were, "Tell Terra to remember us. Message ends." He gave a nod to the communications officer. who sent the packet screaming towards home through subspace. June returned to his chair, his eyes fixed on the darkened planet. The scout's light was just a survey ship. It had no weapons to speak of. It could only bear witness. Set a course for the rally point, he ordered. Maximum speed. We have our evidence. Now we let the Armada know what happened here. As the ship turned away from the chilling silence of Novaya Aurora, Captain Lee Jun made a silent promise to the glassy scars below. To his niece, to the 40,000 voices that had been silenced, remembering was not enough. The silence would be answered. The darkness that had fallen here would be met with fire. The news hit Terra like a physical blow. The images from Novaya Aurora, the glassed Earth, the final desperate transmission of Governor Park, they spread through the networks. A deep, cold silence fell over the planets and stations of humanity. It was a silence of shock, of grief for 40,000 strangers. And then, as the shock faded, it was replaced by a low, building hum of anger. On the command orbital above Mars, Admiral Quan Min watched the reports on the large screen in his quiet office. He was an older man, his hair silver, his face lined with the weight of long command. He had seen conflicts, skirmishes with pirates, territorial disputes. But this was different. He replayed the Krail ship footage, the methodical, clean lines of their attack. This was not war. War had goals, prisoners, negotiations. This was simply deletion. Out he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rust-red curve of Mars below and the glittering web of shipyards surrounding the orbital. The Terran Armada, a force built over centuries for defense, lay dormant in its docks. Great carriers, swift destroyers, and the new, powerful Inferno-class battlecruisers sat silent, their crews conducting routine maintenance. They were a shield. Today, Quan Min would turn them into a sword. He called his senior staff. The orders began to flow, simple and direct. Mobilization. Recall all personnel. Activate all reserve vessels. Prepare the fleet for extended combat operations. The quiet orbital erupted into controlled chaos. Klaxons did not blare. Instead, a steady, urgent tone pulsed through the corridors. Crews in plain gray uniforms moved with new purpose, their faces set in grim determination. The news had reached them too. Across the void, the Scout's light docked with the Third Fleet's main staging area, a massive way station called Bastion. Captain June transferred the blackened data core to the fleet's intelligence division personally. He then made his way to the main briefing room. He felt hollow, the image of the glassed planet seared onto the back of his eyes. He found Commander Park Sumi waiting for him, her usual calm replaced by a tense energy. "The Admiral wants to see us," she said. "And the survivor?" Sergeant Kim Tae-shik stood a few feet away, looking out a viewport at the organized frenzy of the fleet preparing around them. He had been cleaned up, given a fresh uniform, but his eyes held a distant, haunted look. He turned as they approached and saluted sharply. June returned the salute. No words were needed. They had all seen the same horror dot. They were ushered into Admiral Kwan's strategy room. The Admiral did not offer pleasantries. He gestured to the central holotable, where a star map was displayed. Novaya Aurora glowed with a sad gray light. "Captain June, your report was clear. Sergeant Kim, your ground perspective is vital. I need to understand what we are facing, not just as a fleet, but as a species." Kwan's voice was calm, but it held the hardness of titanium. Kim stood stiffly. "Sir, we were on a routine perimeter patrol. We saw the ships come in. They didn't hail. They didn't scan. They just started. The beams from orbit, they didn't just hit military targets. They hit the schools, the water treatment plant, the communal farms." He took a sharp breath. We tried to get back, to help, but the energy fields they put up, we couldn't penetrate. We watched from the ridge. Their ground troops, they moved in units, silent. They didn't yell, they didn't run. They just cleared buildings, efficient, no prisoners. They executed the wounded where they lay. His fists were clenched at his sides. It was a harvest, sir, not a battle. Admiral Kwan nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Did they take anything? Resources technology? No, sir, Kim said, certainty in his voice. They only destroyed. They melted everything. They were cleaning the site. Dr. Choi, the Admiral called out. A woman with a serious, thoughtful face stepped forward from where she had been studying the sensor data. Dr. Choi. Yoon Ji was the fleet's top xenolinguist and analyst. What does your team make of this? Choi manipulated the holodable, pulling up the clearest images of the Krail ships and their insignia. The design philosophy is radically different from ours or any other known species. It rejects redundancy, favors sleek, integrated lines. It speaks of a culture that values purity of form and function. Their attack pattern, as described by Sergeant Kim and seen in the fragmented logs, was ritualistic. Systematic eradication, not conquest. She zoomed in on a symbol on a Krail hull, a series of concentric circles being wiped clean by a sweeping line. I believe this represents their core belief. The universe has a perfect order. They are the agents who remove imperfections. In their view, humanity, as a growing, chaotic spacefaring race, is such an imperfection. Novia Aurora was not a strategic strike. It was a surgical removal of a tumor. The room was silent. The concept was so alien, so cold. It was difficult to grasp, so negotiation is impossible. Sumai stated flatly, "They do not negotiate with a disease," Choi replied softly. Admiral Kwan looked at each of them. He saw June's simmering grief, Kim's hardened rage, Sumi's sharp logic, and Choi's analytical calm. He needed all of it. That our response must be one they understand, Kwan said. They believe in cosmic order? We will show them a new one. They believe in purity through fire? We will show them a fire that consumes even the purifiers. He activated a fleet-wide channel. His face appeared on every screen, in every cockpit, in every engine room across Bastion, and the hundreds of ships now coming to life. People of the Terran Armada, he began, his voice filling the space. You have seen what happened at Novia Aurora. 40,000 of our brothers and sisters are gone. Not lost in an accident, not fallen in a fair fight. They were erased, wiped from existence by a force that believes it has the right to do so. He paused, letting the words hang. We built this armada to protect. Today, that purpose changes. We will protect by ensuring this never happens again. Not to us, not to anyone. We are going to find the ones who did this. We are going to look them in the eye, and we are going to teach them the price of their order. He switched off the channel and turned back to his small audience. Captain June, the Morning Star will be ready for you in 12 hours. She's an Inferno class. You will take point in the vanguard. Commander Park, you have your station. Sergeant Kim, you will be assigned to the Marine detachment aboard. Your experience is crucial. Dr. Choi, you will continue your analysis. Find me a weakness, a pattern, a creed we can break. As they filed out, June felt the hollow space inside him begin to fill. Not with peace, but with a terrible, focused purpose. He went to the observation deck overlooking the main dock. There, cradled in a construction gantry, was the Morning Star. She was larger than any ship he had commanded, her lines not sleek like the Krail daggers, but angular, armored, powerful. Her primary cannons looked like the fists of a god. Her hull was painted a matte black, already scarred from trials. She was not a ship of peace. Across the fleet, the oath was sworn not with words, but with actions. Engineers worked double shifts, their hands sure on plasma conduits. Weapons officers calibrated targeting systems with extra care. Navigators plotted courses into the unknown dark. The grief for Novia Aurora was a shared, quiet thing, a picture of a lost niece, a fallen friend, a stranger who shared a species. That grief was the fuel. The anger was the spark. Admiral Kwan stood alone in his room, looking at the star map. He placed a marker not at Novia Aurora, but deeper in space, along the projected vector of the Krau's retreat. They would find them. The Armada was no longer just a fleet. It was a promise. A promise carried by every soldier, every pilot, every engineer. The promise that the silence left behind on a green and blue world would be answered. Not with words, but with a light that would set the very stars aflame. The transition from the calm of normal space to the chaotic blur of subspace, and then back out again, was always a violent, wrenching experience. For the crew of the Morning Star, it felt different this time. It felt like a hammer being drawn back. Space snapped back into focus around them. Not the familiar stars of home, but a strange, cold sector known as the Kelmer Nexus. The system held a single, aging red dwarf star and, according to long-range probes, a significant Krail logistical depot, a hub for their ships and supplies. It was the first step on the path Admiral Kwan had charted. The first test. On the bridge, Captain Lee Jun felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders, heavier now than ever before. His eyes scanned the main viewer. There it was, the depot. It was not a planet, but a vast, intricate construction of silvery metal, like a spider's web spun from blades. Docked at its spires were several of the dagger-shaped Krail ships, sleek and sinister even at rest. All ships report successful jump, Commander Park Soo-mi said from her tactical station, her voice cool and professional. Fleet is forming up on the Admiral's flag. No immediate hostile reaction. Yet, June murmured. He watched as the Terran Armada spilled into reality around them. The Inferno-class battlecruisers, like his own, were the speartip, flanked by waves of agile destroyers and the hulking, carrier-like bastion ships. They moved into a standard defensive formation, a textbook sphere. It felt wrong, stiff, predictable. A new signal appeared on the edge of the sensor sphere. Then another, and another. Pinpricks of light resolved into the distinctive shapes of Krail warships. They were not docked. They had been lying in wait, silent and powered down in the dark. A trap, or simply their standard patrol? It didn't matter. They were here. The Krail fleet moved. They did not form a defensive sphere. They arranged themselves in a long, elegant line, a ceremonial wall of silver, presenting their broadsides. It was a formation from an older age of warfare, meant for a simultaneous, honorable exchange of fire. Reading energy spikes from their lead vessels, Soo-mi announced. Weapons powering. They're charging their primary lances. Admiral Kwan's voice came over the fleet channel, calm and clear. All vessels stand by. Hold formation. June's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. The textbook said to hold, to meet the enemy's volley with their own, shield to shield. But the Krail were creatures of ritual, of form. They expected a certain kind of fight, a pure fight. To give them that was to lose. Captain, Soo-mi said, a note of tension in her voice. They will be in optimal range in 40 seconds. June made a decision. He opened a direct channel to the Admiral. Sir, permission to break from the sphere. Let me show you how a disease fights. There was a heartbeat of silence on the channel. Then Kwan's reply. Granted. Show us, Captain June. June turned to his crew. Helm, all ahead flank. Take us directly at the center of their line. Su-Mi, target their lead ship's engine clusters with our secondary batteries. Ignore their broadside. Deploy gravity mines along our path, pattern Delta. The Morning Star surged forward, a black wedge tearing out of the safe Terran formation. On the view screen, the neat line of Krail ships grew larger. Emerald energy gathered at their prows. They're firing. Su-Mi called out. Brilliant lances of green light shot across the void. They were beautiful and terrible. They slammed into the Morning Star's forward shields, which flared a brilliant, strained blue. The ship shuddered, alarms wailing for a second before being silenced. Shields at 70%. They hit hard, but they're slow between shots, the helmsman reported. Exactly, June said. They fire in volleys, ritual. We do not. He turned back to Su-Mi. Now, the Morning Star released a cloud of canisters that burst into shimmering fields of distorted gravity. They were not weapons, but obstacles. The next volley of Krail lances streaked into them, bending and scattering, their clean lines turned into wild, harmless energy. The Krail line seemed to hesitate. This was not in their script. The Morning Star was among them. It did not turn to present its own broadside. It drove like a spear, its forward-mounted heavy cannons roaring to life. Not with elegant lances, but with massive, kinetic shells and blistering plasma. It fired at point-blank range into the side of the lead Krail cruiser. The enemy ship's sleek armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, cracked and buckled under the physical assault. Atmosphere and debris vented into the void in a silent explosion. Chaos erupted. The Terran fleet, seeing the tactic, broke its own rigid sphere. Destroyers swarmed like angry hornets, targeting the Krail ship's precise weapon arrays with rapid-fire pulse cannons. The carriers launched fighters not in neat squadrons, but in overwhelming, disorienting waves that harried the Krail vessels from all angles. On the Morning Star, Sergeant Tin Tae-shik watched the main screen from the Marine-ready room. He saw the clean silver lines of the Krail ships being marred by explosions and black scorch marks. He saw one of their cruisers trying to turn to bring its main gun to bear on a Terran destroyer, get struck in the rear by a spread of torpedoes from another angle. A grim, hard smile touched his lips. This was not the clean, one-sided slaughter of Novia Aurora. This was messy. This was Human Dot in the intelligence suite. Dr. Choi Yoon-ji monitored the flood of data. The Krail communications, once silent, were now a frantic, buzzing chatter on a frequency her computers had just locked onto. Their language was complex, mathematical, but the emotion underneath was clear. Confusion, then disbelief, then a rising note of what she could only interpret as outrage. They were calling the human tactics chaotic, dishonorable, unclean. She listened, her mind working. Their outrage was a weakness. Their reliance on form was a flaw. Captain, Choi's voice came over the comm to the bridge. I have their primary command frequency. Their communications are rigid, hierarchical. If we can jam or mimic a high-level signal, we could disrupt their coordination. Do it, June ordered, his eyes fixed on the battle. The Morning Star was trading blows with a second Krail ship, its black armor now scarred with molten green streaks. Choi and her team worked swiftly. They crafted a burst transmission, a crude imitation of a Krail priority command. It was a simple order: disengage and regroup at Factor 9. They sent it on the captured frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a third of the Krail ships broke from the engagement, their movements turning orderly as they pivoted to the new vector. It created a gap in their formation, a gap the Terran ships exploited with brutal efficiency, focusing fire on the isolated vessels. The Krail fleet, what was left of it, began a retreat. They did not flee in panic, but in a stiff, orderly withdrawal, covering each other with precise rearguard fire. They left the smoldering depot and the husks of their fallen ships behind. The bridge of the Morning Star was filled with the smell of ozone and sweat. The crew was quiet, checking systems, assessing damage. They had won, but there was no cheering. June looked at the drifting wreckage, the expanding clouds of gas and debris that had been enemy ships. He felt no triumph, only a cold confirmation. They could be hurt. They could be broken. Admiral Kwan's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. A costly lesson for them, Captain. And a vital one for us. Dr. Choi, did you get what we need? Choi nodded, her face illuminated by her screens. Yes, Admiral. During the engagement, their command ship prioritized data streams to a specific, heavily encrypted destination deep within their territory. I've isolated the coordinate set. It's not a random retreat vector. It's a path. I believe it leads to the source, to where they build their ships and their doctrine. She transferred the data to the main viewer. A star map appeared, with a single glaring red dot pulsing at the end of a long, inferred route. It was a place not on any human chart. It had no name. Yet Kwan studied it, then looked back at June and his crew. Then we follow the path. We take the fight to their heart. Let them see what their purification has unleashed. He paused. All ships, secure the area. Prepare for the next jump. The lesson is over. Now we begin the war. The star system was called nothing by human charts. To the Krail, Dr. Choi Yoon-ji had deciphered, it was known as Vur-Ka, the Prime Forge. It was the heart of their power, the cradle of their civilization's might. The Terran Armada emerged from subspace at its edge, and the sight that filled the viewports stole the breath from every bridge. The system's sun was a fierce white star. Orbiting, it was not a planet, but a vast, intricate latticework of metal, a ringed and spired construction, the size of a small moon. It was the Forge World. From its countless docks, new dagger ships were being birthed, sliding smoothly into the void. A dense network of defensive platforms, each bristling with weaponry, formed concentric rings around it. And between the Armada and its target hung the Krail Home Defense Fleet. It was not a patrol, not a line. It was a wall of silver, a forest of blade-like progs, hundreds strong. They had been waiting. On the bridge of the Morning Star, Captain Lee Jun felt a strange calm. This was it. The promised fire. The sight of the Armada that had erased Novaya Aurora, multiplied 100-fold, should have brought fear. It only hardened his resolve. Signal from the Admiral. Commander Park Sumi said, her voice tight. Admiral Kwan Min's face was stern on the screen. They outnumber us. Their defenses are formidable. They expect a direct assault, a final, glorious clash of their purity against our chaos. He allowed a thin, cold smile. We will not give it to them. All ships, execute Plan Ashes. The Terran fleet did not charge. It fractured. The battle cruisers, including the Morning Star, powered forward, but not in a spearhead. They flew in tight, unpredictable packs, drawing the attention of the largest Krail capital ships, the destroyers and fast-attack frigates. Smaller and quicker, shot away on flanking vectors, heading not for the fleet, but for the outer defense platforms. The Krail met them with the same disciplined, volley-based fire. Lances of emerald light filled space. But the Terrans were no longer fighting the battle of Kelmer Nexus. They had learned. They weaved through the patterns of fire, their electronic warfare suites blaring out nonsense signals and gravity pulses that made targeting a nightmare. The clean, silent void of Krail space became a chaotic storm of light and noise. June gripped his chair as the Morning Star took a direct hit on its port side. The ship groaned, a deep metal sound that vibrated through the deck. Shield failure on sections 4 through 7. Hull breach on lower deck, contained. Sumi reported, her fingers flying over damaged control screens. Return fire. Concentrate on that cruiser's command spire. June ordered. The Morning Star's main cannons thundered. Their projectiles, mixtures of high explosive and armor-piercing core, were brute force against the Kral's elegant energy weapons. The Kral cruiser's smooth hull shattered inward in a messy, explosive spray of fragments. It began to drift, its lights dying dot in the Marine barracks. Sergeant Kim Tae-shik and his squad were suited up, waiting in the harsh red light of the dropship bay. Their mission was not the planet. It was a command ship, a boarding action. Insanity against the Kral. But as Kim checked his heavy plasma cutter, he thought of the silent, efficient troops on Novaya Aurora. Today, he would bring the noise. Their carrier, the Dauntless, swung close to a wounded Kral dreadnought. Magnetic grapnels shot out, clamping onto the alien hull with a shuddering clang. Go, go, go. Kim yelled, and his squad blasted the airlock open and poured into the enemy ship. The interior was eerily silent, lit by a soft, ambient glow. The corridors were smooth, seamless, without corners. It felt more like a temple than a warship. Then the defenders came. Kral warriors in form-fitting silver armor, their faces hidden behind smooth helms. They moved in unison, raising weapons that glowed with the same green energy. For Novaya Aurora. Kim roared, and the close-quarters fight began. It was not elegant. It was brutal, deafening, and personal. Human pulse rifles barked, filling the perfect corridors with smoke and ricochets. Kim used his plasma cutter to melt through a Kral defensive position, the superheated metal dripping like wax. The Kral fought with precise, controlled movements. The humans fought to survive, to kill, to make the enemy feel their presence. Back in the main fleet battle, the Terran flanking maneuver reached the defense platforms. Instead of destroying them, the agile ships planted sophisticated vortex charges on their support structures. One by one, the platforms were not blown up, but torn apart from the inside out by localized gravitational singularities, their debris becoming a hazard field for the Kral ships trying to maneuver. Dr. Choi, monitoring from the Morning Star's Intelligence Center, saw the shift in the Kral command network. The outrage from Kelmer Nexus had turned to something else, disbelief, and a cascading failure of coordination. Their ritualistic chain of command was too slow for this chaos. A high-priority signal, filled with what she interpreted as alarm, was being broadcast from the Forge world itself, a direct order to all ships to fall back and defend the central forges. Captain June, Admiral, she broadcast. They are pulling back to defend the primary production rings. Their fleet cohesion is breaking to protect the source. Admiral Kwan's voice was immediate. All units, press the advantage. Vanguard, punch a hole. Get the bombers through. The Morning Star, scarred and burning from multiple hits, led a final desperate charge with 2 other battlecruisers. They focused every weapon on a single point in the retreating Kral line, a point that protected the approach vector to the Forge world. Shields failed. Armor vaporized. A Kral ship directly in their path simply came apart. The hole was open. From the bellies of the Terran carriers, waves of heavy bombers shot through the gap like vengeful spirits. They flew through the storm of point defense fire, many bursting into flames, but others held their course. Their target was not the population centers of the Forge world. There seemed to be none. Their target was the vast, glowing energy conduits feeding the forges, the shipyard gantries, the mineral processing hubs that the bombers released their payloads. These were not simple explosives. They were planet cracker derivatives, seismic induction charges designed to trigger catastrophic chain reactions in megastructures. The first impact was silent in the vacuum. Then a flash, blinding white, erupted from a primary shipyard ring. The ring twisted, then fractured, breaking into two gigantic tumbling pieces. Secondary explosions rippled along its length, a string of firecrackers leading to the main forges. A vast energy conduit, severed, whipped like a dying snake, spewing torrents of plasma that engulfed a dozen docked ships. The forge world began to burn. Not with the clean, glassing fire of Novia Aurora, but with a dirty, spreading inferno of ruptured reactors, melting metal, and propagating systems failures. The elegant, perfect symmetry of the Krail heart was being violated, turned into a monument of ruin. The remaining Krail fleet lost all semblance of order. Some hurled themselves at the Terrans in suicidal rage. Others fled into the dark. The battle was over. On the bridge of the Morning Star, June watched the great forge burn. The light of the fires danced on his tired face. There was no victory in his heart, only a vast and terrible emptiness, and the knowledge that a debt, however bloody, had been paid. Sergeant Kim's squad fought their way back to their breaching point, the Krail ship dying around them. As his dropship pulled away, Kim looked back at the silver dreadnought, now scarred and venting atmosphere from a dozen human-made wounds. He felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction that the silent killers had finally heard a human scream. Admiral Quan surveyed the scene. The Terran Armada was battered, bleeding, but intact. The Krail forge world was a shattered, burning hive. He opened a fleet-wide channel, his voice heavy with the cost. Secure the area. Prepare for recovery operations. He paused, looking at the stellar fire reflected in his screen. The lesson is taught. Now they will learn the consequence. Silence had returned to the void, but it was a different silence than before. It was not the empty quiet of deep space, but the stunned, ringing quiet that follows a cataclysm. The last fleeing Krail ships had vanished into subspace, their orderly retreat broken into scattered, desperate jumps. The Terran Armada hung in the darkness, a fleet of battered giants watching their handiwork. The prime forge world was not gone. It was broken. Vast sections of the intricate lattice were dark, torn apart by the internal chain reactions the bombers had triggered. Fires still guttered in the zero-oxygen vacuum, fed by chemical stores and ruptured fuel lines, casting a flickering, hellish glow on the twisted metal. The great shipyards, once birthplaces of silent daggers, were now cold, mangled skeletons. The sight filled the viewports of every human ship, a stark and terrible monument. On the bridge of the Morning Star, Captain Li Jun felt the weariness deep in his bones. The ship around him hummed with damage reports and the low voices of his crew. They had survived. He looked at Commander Park Sumi, who gave him a small, exhausted nod. They had done what they came to do. There was no celebration. The cost was etched into the scars on their hull and the faces of their missing crew. A shuttle, escorted by 2 gunships, departed from the Admiral's flagship and moved towards the heart of the ruin. It docked with one of the few remaining intact structures on the Forge World's central spire, a command nexus. Admiral Quan Min, along with the security detail that included Sergeant Kim Tae-shik, had gone to meet the enemy. They found the Krail hierarch in a vast, circular chamber. The walls were screens, now mostly dark or showing static. The Krail was tall, slender, clad in robes of silver and gray that seemed to absorb the dim light. Its face was narrow, with large, dark eyes that held no pupil, only a shimmer like oil on water. It stood unarmed, surrounded by the wreckage of its control systems. It did not look afraid. It looked confused. Admiral Quan stood before it, Dr. Choi Yun-ji at his side to translate. The hierarch's voice, when it spoke, was synthesized through a device on its robe, the tones flat and mathematical. "You have destroyed a thing of beauty and order," the hierarch stated. "You have spread your chaos into a sacred place. For what? For one insignificant colony of your proliferating species?" Quan listened, his face impassive. When he replied, his voice was quiet, but it carried through the dead chamber. "You call Novaya Aurora insignificant. You call its people a disease. You saw only numbers, only a problem to be solved." He took a step forward. "We did not come here for your resources. We did not come to conquer your worlds. We came to give you an answer to the question you never thought to ask." The hierarch tilted its head. "What question? What is the cost?" Quan said, each word deliberate. "You believed you could erase a future, a world of 40,000 souls, and pay no price. You believed your order was the only order. We have shown you the cost. We have shown you that our chaos has its own rules. The first rule is this: you do not get to decide who matters." The Krail was silent for a long moment, its dark eyes studying the human admiral. "You wage war like a force of nature, unpredictable, destructive. You have no creed but retaliation." "We have a creed," Quan corrected him. "It is memory, and we remember everything." He gestured to the shattered viewports, the burning rings beyond. "You will remember this, and you will tell any other who thinks as you do that to touch humanity is to grasp a star. You will be burned." He turned and left the chamber. The hierarch did not move, standing alone amidst the ruin of its certainty. Back on the Morning Star, June stood on the observation deck. The massive blast doors were open, revealing the stars and the burning forge world below. Sergeant Kim joined him, still in his combat gear, the smell of ozone and smoke clinging to him. "It's done then," Kim said, his voice hoarse. "This part is," June replied. He thought of his niece's smile, forever lost. The fury that had propelled him across the stars had burned down to embers, leaving only ash and a hollow space. "It doesn't bring them back." "No, sir," Kim agreed. He looked at his hands, remembering the feel of the plasma cutter, the screams in the Krail corridors. "But they know now. They know we won't just disappear." On the bridge, Commander Sumi was coordinating with the fleet's logistics officers. Repair tugs were already moving, tending to the most wounded ships. Rescue shuttles scanned for human life pods, though few had been launched in the frenzy of the assault. The mood was somber, efficient. The job was not over. The Armada had to get home. Dr. Choi Yun-ji sat in her lab, the cacophony of intercepted Krail signals now reduced to a faint, despairing whisper. She had listened to their final, unencrypted broadcasts. They spoke of the Great Disharmony and the Firebringers. The myth of Krail invincibility and moral certainty had been shattered, not just by force, but by the terrifying, illogical nature of the force. Humanity fought for ghosts, for memory, for a concept as chaotic and powerful as love for the lost. It was a variable their pure equations could never solve. Admiral Quan returned to his flagship. He stood before a star map in his ready room. He placed a marker not on the Forge World, but on Novaya Aurora. It glowed with a soft, steady, blue light. Then he placed another marker, this one red and pulsing slowly, over the Krail system. A warning. A reminder. He opened a final fleet-wide channel. There was no triumph in his voice, only the grave weight of command. This battle is over. The Forge World of the Krail is broken. Their fleet is scattered. The immediate threat is ended. He paused, letting the words settle. We did not do this for conquest or for glory. We did it for the 40,000 who cannot speak. We did it so that no other human colony, no other species that falls prey to such arrogance, will ever face the silence they faced. We have shown the darkness that we carry our own light. A terrible light. A final light. He looked out at the fleet, his fleet, hanging in the shadow of the ruin they had made. We are not heroes. We are the consequence. Remember that. Remember Novaya Aurora. Remember the cost of our peace. Now set your courses for home. The Armada stands watch. Across the ships, crews returned to their stations. Navigation plots were laid in for the long jump back to Terran space. In the medical bays, the wounded were tended. In the quiet barracks, soldiers finally slept, their dreams haunted by fire and silence. The morning star turned slowly, its battered nose pointing away from the dying fires of the foreworld. The stars ahead were clean and cold. Captain June took one last look at the reflection of the orange glow on his ship's scarred hull. Then he turned his chair forward towards the dark, peaceful sky. "Take us home, Commander Park," he said. The engines powered up, a steady, familiar vibration through the deck. The Terran Armada, a collection of wounded giants, began to move as one, leaving the blazing monument behind. They did not look back. They carried the memory with them, a silent, burning weight that would forever light their way through the dark. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the last of the human ships vanished, leaving only the wreckage and a lesson written in flame.